Let's create a net. You want to make a net and see if we can get our stuff up out of the snow? Let's go, come. Nets aren't hard to make, especially a bushcraft net. So let's get into it. To make this type of net, there's no netting needles, there's nothing to that extent. This is just simply suspending line, tying knots, creating a uniform pattern. You just have to think about what you're using that net for. Am I using it to carry gear? Am I using it to establish a gill net and trap fish? Am I using it to ensnare some sort of animal? Variety of nets for a variety of reasons. I'm going to be using this orange line. This is similar to a bank line, but I want folks to be able to actually see the net in certain forms, especially the knots and the overall figure. I'm not looking to secure the line permanently. I'm just looking to attach it to this tree, but I want to be able to take it down later. So a square knot, a couple overhand knots, just something that's going to keep this line where it's at so I can tie the rest of the net onto it. Run cordage all the way across my top line, or one pigtail. All I'm going to do is I'm going to secure it to this line. Any sort of knot will work, you just don't want it to be able to slide too much. Now that I have my top line and I have my first hanging strand, I'm going to match this the whole way across. Now this is the same sort of net that I made on the Iceland episode of Mud, Sweat, and Beards, and erected it between a giant split kind of lacrosse stick looking thing to catch puffins. So it's a very effective net. Requires some time, that's all. Once I have all my pieces of cordage strung across my top bar, all I'm going to do is start joining pieces by twos. So I'm going to take these two right here. All I'm going to do is just tie a real simple overhand knot. Then I'm going to set and dress my knot. I'm not pulling on the knot, I'm pulling on the individual strands until I create a triangle. I'm going to leave this one here and then come to the next two. I want these two triangles to mirror one another. Space those out, move on to the next two. Once I've gone through and I've created my first series of netting loops, I'm going to come back to the very beginning and I'm going to take one strand from this first netting loop and one strand from this other netting loop, and I'm going to tie them together. I'm going to have one still hanging on my right, I'm going to have one still hanging on my left. I'm going to kind of pinch and just tie that same overhand knot. Now that I've connected these two, I'm going to take my one leftover strand and take one strand from that other side, that other knot right next to it, and tie an overhand knot. And then the netting will start to begin. Come to my next one. After you go through your second series of knots, your net will really take shape. Once you start tying all these guys together, all these secondary ones, because I'm going to come back, I'm going to tie these two together. you'll start to see your net will take shape, knot after knot after knot. So these knots, this kind of second row of knots, is really where the net's going to start taking shape. All these connection points up here, you can untie, and that's what you would secure to some facet of cordage, or a branch for a dip net, or even some sort of scoop net, case by case. But these are really those first phases of that net. Once you've done your first or second series of knots, you're going to go back to the very beginning. So essentially, I'm going to take two, another two, another two, and I'm going to start creating another series of knots the whole way across. One and one. Start forming my next net loop. One and one. One from the left, one from the right. Set and dress. Okay, this is just taking your time, trying to line your knots up. At first it will look a little bit, maybe the word is unnetty, but once you start creating that pattern, you can start to see that net. Before you know it, it's just grabbing strands, one from the left, one from the right, repeating the process, tying them together. It's going to always tighten out a little bit in the middle because all the strands are pulling kind of a funky direction out, causing these, but if you just pull down on these centerpieces, you can see how that net will actually form. Each time I tie an overhand knot, I stick my thumb in the loop and I center it right underneath that knot above it, so I get one nice straight line. Now I have a net that I could, if I had a shelter, I could store things up in it. I could drop this into a stream or river and use this like a gill net for fish. I could use it for simple trapping. You could build a pack out of it. You could do anything with just this basic netting sort of repeat, You tie your fixed line, start doing alternating knots every other string, and you can create a net. With this method, you can obviously create much larger, much smaller nets with smaller holes and finer holes. There's a lot of ways to continue building onto it. I got all my little pigtails on the end. You can see those guys. I can always add more cordage, but this is a very basic way of creating a bushcraft net. Simple nets like this keep your gear dry. You can trap fish, you can trap game, you can do quite a bit with it. But down and dirty, time to make a net. Thanks for watching.